All right, to get started, one of the first things we have to do is safely raise the front of the truck by the frame so the suspension's hanging. After that, remove all 5 lug nuts and then the wheel. All right, now that the wheel's off, we have a nice clear view of our tie rod ends and our adjusting sleeve. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and loosen up these nuts so that way there we can loosen this adjustment sleeve. Just going to come under here, hold that bolt head. Now the next thing I like to do before I make any adjustment would be, of course, to measure the overall length from the end of one tie rod end, the inner tie rod end, all the way to the end of the outer tie rod end. Take a quick note of that on a piece of paper and then we'll continue. So now that we have it measured, let's continue on by putting a generous amount of penetrant inside of this slotted area here. That way there it can make its way to the threaded area. Once we've done that, let's use some nice long pliers and just work this back and forth to help work in the penetrant. The next thing we're going to do is come right down here to the outer tie rod end. You might notice that it has a cotter pin or a locking pin of some sort. Ours is rotted away, so I can't remove it, but if yours has it, go ahead and take it out of there. After that, remove your nut. Now we're going to take our hammer and hit right along this area here, being careful not to damage our boot or the stud. Now the next thing we want to do is pay attention to this slotted area here. We're going to continue spinning this clockwise, and we're going to count how many times this comes around. That was 1. Let's continue until it comes apart. There we are. Now that we have that out of the way, let's continue on to removing our inner tie rod end nut. You might notice that it has a cotter pin. If it does, go ahead and remove that and then remove the nut. Now the next thing we need to do is separate our inner tie rod end from its mounting point. I'm going to do that using a pickle fork and my hammer. There it is, friends. Now it's going to be time to get our inner tie rod end back in there. Take our castle nut. You want the castled area facing out and away. Start that on there. We'll snug it up, torque it to manufacturer's specifications. Now that we have it bottomed out, let's go ahead and torque it to 35 foot-pounds. Now that we have this torque, the next thing you want to pay attention to is the hole that's in the stud of the tie rod and the slots that are on the nut for the tie rod. You want to, of course, make sure that those are lined up because we're going to put in our cotter pin. If for some reason they're not, you need to continue tightening until the very next one does. I'm just going to go ahead and put this right in here. Once you have it in, go ahead and pin it over so there's no way that nut can loosen up. Now it's time to get this back together. Something that I want to mention real quick is it's a good idea to use a little bit of copper never seize inside on the threaded area of your sleeve. Once we have that on there, let's go ahead and start this on. Just one little thread on the inner. There we are. That's just going to essentially hold it for us. Now that we have that one started, let's go ahead and start the outer tie rod end as well. Now that we have it started, let's continue by tightening up the sleeve itself. That's going to make sure that the tie rods are being timed. As we continue tightening this, let's count the amount of turns that this makes. That way there we can match it up to when we're removing it. Something else that I want to mention real quick is on the sleeve, you have that grooved area. Something to pay attention to with that is if it's possible, you want to have the grooved area facing either down or either towards the back a little bit. Either way, if you can make it so it's not facing up along the top, that would be best. That way there, the least amount of stuff makes its way inside. Something else to mention is on these clamps right here, you want to make sure that you don't have the opening of the clamp lined up with the slot on the sleeve itself. So if it's off just by a little bit like this, that's going to be fine. But if you go ahead and line it up, you're creating an area for a weak point and the bolt could potentially break and your tie rod could come out. Put it through here. We'll start on our nut, snug it up, and then we'll torque it to 35 foot-pounds. Put through that locking cotter pin, and then of course pin it over, so that way there's no way for the nut to come loose. Now I'm just going to go ahead and snug these up, and then we'll torque them to 15 foot-pounds. There we are. Let's do the same to the other. Let's go ahead and get our wheel on here, start all of our lug nuts, snug them up, and then get the wheel on the ground, torque it to 100 foot-pounds. All right, let's torque these to 100. Torqued. If you have your little lug covers, go ahead and throw those on as well. After that, I recommend getting yourself a 4-wheel alignment.